This is Mental Forge, where weakness burns and warriors are built. There's a moment when you stop pretending and start becoming. It happens quietly, almost imperceptibly, like the shift from night to dawn. One day you're playing the role of success, wearing it like an ill-fitting suit, and the next day you realize the suit has become your skin. This is the moment when acting as if becomes living as. This is the moment when your dream life stops being a distant fantasy and starts being your present reality. Picture this. A young man sits in his cramped apartment, surrounded by rejection letters from publishers, eating another meal of instant noodles because it's all he can afford. But every morning, he dresses in his one good suit, sits at his makeshift desk, and writes with the posture of a best-selling author. He speaks to himself with the confidence of someone whose words have changed millions of lives. He carries himself with the quiet dignity of a person who knows his worth, even when the world hasn't recognized it yet. This isn't delusion. This isn't fake it until you make it. This is something far more profound and scientifically grounded. This is the deliberate rewiring of identity through consistent action. The transformation I'm about to share with you isn't theoretical. It's not another motivational pep talk that leaves you feeling good for a few hours before reality crashes back in. This is a systematic approach to becoming the person you're meant to be, backed by neuroscience, proven by history, and accessible to anyone willing to commit to the process. When you truly understand how to act as if you're already living your dream life, you don't just change your circumstances, you change your very essence. You become someone who naturally creates the life others only dream about. The human brain doesn't distinguish between vividly imagined experiences and actual ones when it comes to forming neural pathways. This isn't New Age philosophy. This is documented neuroscience. When you consistently act as if you're already the person you want to become, your brain begins rewiring itself to support that identity. Your subconscious mind, that vast processing center that controls 90% of your thoughts and actions, starts aligning with your conscious intentions. Your nervous system begins calibrating to higher levels of success and abundance. Your very physiology shifts to support the person you're becoming. Let me take you back to a small town in Michigan in the late 1800s. A young mechanic named Henry Ford was obsessed with the idea of putting America on wheels. At the time, automobiles were luxury toys for the wealthy, hand-built, and prohibitively expensive. But Ford carried himself with the certainty of someone who had already revolutionized transportation. He spoke about mass production with the authority of someone who had already perfected the assembly line. He made decisions from the perspective of someone who was already changing the world. His colleagues thought he was delusional. His investors often questioned his sanity. But Ford had tapped into something far more powerful than optimism or positive thinking. He had learned to inhabit the identity of the man he was destined to become. Every morning, Ford would walk through his small workshop as if he were walking through the largest automotive manufacturing facility in the world. He would examine each component with the eye of someone who had already built millions of cars. He would speak to his workers with the confidence of someone who employed thousands. This wasn't pretense. This was preparation. His mind, his body, and his energy were already calibrated to success long before the Model T rolled off the first assembly line. When success finally arrived, it didn't surprise him. He had been living in that reality for years. The principle Ford unconsciously applied is what modern psychology calls identity-based behavior change. Instead of focusing solely on outcomes, you focus on becoming the type of person who naturally produces those outcomes. Instead of trying to have success, you become successful. Instead of trying to attract wealth, you become wealthy in your thinking, your habits, and your daily actions. This shift from having to being is the difference between temporary wins and lasting transformation. I want you to consider subscribing to this channel if you're finding value in these ideas, because we're going deep into transformation strategies that most people never encounter. The community we're building here is committed to genuine growth, not surface-level motivation. Your current identity was formed through repetition. Every time you've thought a certain way, acted a certain way, or made a certain type of decision, you've strengthened the neural pathways that define who you are. The good news is that identity is not fixed. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize and form new neural connections throughout life, means you can literally rewire who you are through consistent new patterns of thought and action. The person you've been is simply the result of your past repetitions. The person you're becoming is the result of your current ones. But here's where most people get it wrong. They try to change their identity by thinking about it, by visualizing it, by hoping for it. While these practices have value, real identity change happens through embodiment. You must think like the person you want to become, speak like them, move like them, make decisions like them, and take action like them. You must inhabit that identity so completely that it becomes more real than your current circumstances. The great Roman emperor Marcus Aurelius understood this principle intimately. Long before he inherited the throne, he carried himself with the dignity and wisdom of a ruler. He studied philosophy not as a student seeking knowledge, but as a leader preparing to guide an empire. He made decisions with the weight of responsibility, even when that responsibility was theoretical. When he finally became emperor, observers noted that he seemed to have been born for the role. But the truth was simpler and more profound. He had been practicing being emperor his entire life. Aurelius wrote extensively about the power of living from your highest self, of acting always from the perspective of the person you're capable of becoming. He understood that external circumstances are temporary, but the identity you cultivate within yourself is permanent. In his private journal, later published as Meditations, he repeatedly reminded himself to act in accordance with his highest nature, not his temporary feelings or circumstances. This practice of identity alignment is what allowed him to remain centered and effective through plagues, wars, and political upheaval. The neuroscience behind this approach is remarkable. When you consistently act in alignment with a desired identity, you activate what researchers call the reticular activating system, the part of your brain that filters information and focuses attention. Your RAS begins noticing opportunities, resources, and connections that support your new identity while filtering out information that contradicts it. You literally begin to see a different world, one that matches your internal reality. Simultaneously, your behavior patterns begin shifting through what psychologists call implementation intentions. Instead of hoping you'll make better choices, you pre-decide how the person you're becoming would handle specific situations. Instead of relying on willpower in the moment of temptation, you've already established the response pattern of your highest self. This creates what researchers call automaticity, where positive behaviors become as natural and unconscious as breathing. The spiritual dimension of this transformation is equally profound. When you act from the identity of your highest self, you align with what many wisdom traditions call your true nature. You stop living from the cramped perspective of fear, limitation, and scarcity, and begin living from the expanded perspective of possibility, abundance, and power. This isn't about becoming someone else. This is about becoming who you actually are beneath the layers of conditioning and circumstance. Consider the story of Abraham Lincoln, a man who embodied this principle in one of history's most challenging contexts. Born into poverty in a one-room log cabin, Lincoln could have allowed his circumstances to define his identity. Instead, from an early age, he carried himself with the dignity of someone destined for significance. He educated himself with the intensity of someone preparing for great responsibility. He spoke with the moral authority of someone who already understood the weight of leadership. Even as a young lawyer riding the circuit courts of Illinois, Lincoln conducted himself with the gravitas of a statesman. His colleagues noted that he seemed to carry an invisible weight of responsibility, as if he were already accountable to history. When the weight of the presidency finally fell on his shoulders during the nation's greatest crisis, he was ready. Not because he had been trained for that specific role, but because he had been living from that identity his entire adult life. The practical application of this principle begins with a fundamental shift in your daily questions. Instead of asking, "What do I want?" you ask, "Who do I want to become?" Instead of asking, "How can I get what I want?" you ask, "How would the person I'm becoming approach this situation?" This subtle shift moves you from a mindset of seeking and striving to a mindset of being and becoming. Your morning routine becomes an identity rehearsal. The successful person you're becoming wakes up at a specific time, not because they have to, but because that's who they are. They exercise their body because they're the type of person who values health and vitality. They feed their mind with educational content because they're committed to continuous growth. They plan their day with intention because they understand that time is their most valuable resource. Every morning action becomes a vote for the identity you're creating. Your response to challenges shifts dramatically when you operate from this expanded identity. The person you're becoming doesn't see obstacles as proof that success is impossible. They see obstacles as the very mechanism through which they develop the character and capabilities necessary for their next level. When faced with rejection, they respond with the resilience of someone who knows their worth isn't determined by external validation. When confronted with financial pressure, they make decisions from the perspective of someone who understands the principles of wealth creation, even if their bank account hasn't caught up yet. This is precisely what separated Thomas Edison from thousands of other inventors of his era. Edison didn't just want to create inventions. He became an inventor. His identity was so thoroughly aligned with innovation that failure was simply data, setbacks were simply delays, and criticism was simply noise. When others saw his repeated failures with the light bulb as evidence that he should give up, Edison saw them as necessary steps toward success. He wasn't trying to become successful. He was already successful in his identity, and his external results eventually aligned with that internal reality. Edison's laboratory in Menlo Park wasn't just a workspace, it was a physical manifestation of his identity as someone who would change the world through innovation. Every tool, every experiment, every conversation was conducted from the perspective of someone whose inventions would eventually light up the world. This wasn't arrogance or wishful thinking. This was identity alignment. Edison lived and breathed the reality of success long before the world recognized him as successful. The transformation extends into every area of your life when you truly embrace this approach. Your relationship with money shifts from scarcity to stewardship when you begin thinking like a wealthy person. Wealthy people don't see money as scarce. They see it as abundant and flowing. They don't hoard money out of fear. They invest it strategically for growth. They don't spend impulsively to fill emotional voids. They spend intentionally to create value and experiences that align with their highest priorities. Start thinking like the wealthy person you're becoming. Track every dollar with the attention of someone building an empire. Make spending decisions from the perspective of someone who understands that every financial choice is either moving you toward or away from your goals. Educate yourself about money with the intensity of someone who plans to have a lot of it. This isn't about pretending to have money you don't have. This is about developing the mindset and habits that naturally create wealth. The compound effect of small, identity-aligned actions is where the real magic happens. When you exercise because you're the type of person who takes care of their body, you're not just building physical strength, you're reinforcing an identity of discipline and self-respect. When you read educational material because you're the type of person committed to growth, you're not just gaining knowledge, you're strengthening your identity as someone who invests in themselves. When you wake up early because successful people maximize their time, you're not just gaining extra hours. You're becoming someone who values time as a precious resource. Each identity-aligned action sends a signal to your subconscious mind about who you are and what you value. Your subconscious, being the faithful servant it is, begins organizing your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors to support this identity. Your energy shifts, your posture changes, your conversation topics evolve. People begin responding to you differently because you're literally becoming a different person. Consider Napoleon Bonaparte, a man who understood the power of identity on a massive scale. Born into minor nobility on the island of Corsica, Napoleon could have lived a quiet, unremarkable life. Instead, from his earliest days at military school, he carried himself with the bearing of someone destined to shape history. He studied military strategy with the intensity of someone who would lead armies. He spoke with the authority of someone born to command. Even as a young artillery officer, Napoleon's colleagues noted something different about him. He didn't just follow orders. He thought like a general. He didn't just execute tactics. He understood strategy. He didn't just fight battles. He envisioned campaigns. His rapid rise through the ranks wasn't luck or politics. It was the natural result of someone who had been preparing for leadership his entire life. Napoleon's famous quote, "I can see only the goal, nothing can stop me," reveals his understanding of identity-based achievement. He didn't see obstacles because his identity was so aligned with success that setbacks were simply part of the process. His mind was calibrated to solutions, not problems. His energy was focused on possibilities, not limitations. This mental conditioning allowed him to accomplish things that others considered impossible. Your daily decision-making process transforms when you operate from your highest identity. The person you're becoming doesn't make choices based on immediate comfort or convenience. They make choices based on long-term alignment with their values and goals. They don't ask, "What do I feel like doing?" They ask, "What would the person I'm becoming do in this situation?" This decision-making framework eliminates the internal conflict that paralyzes most people. Instead of battling between your current desires and your future goals, you're operating from the integrated identity of someone whose current desires align with their future goals. The person you're becoming wants to wake up early because they understand the power of starting the day with intention. They want to exercise because they value their health and energy. They want to learn because they're committed to growth. Let me share a story that illustrates this principle in action. Andrew Carnegie arrived in America as a poor immigrant child, working in a textile mill for $1.20 a week. But Carnegie carried himself with the dignity of someone destined for greatness. He approached every job, no matter how menial, with the attitude of someone preparing for bigger responsibilities. When he worked as a telegraph operator, he didn't just send messages. He studied the business communication patterns of successful men. When he invested his first savings in railroad stocks, he didn't just hope for returns. He educated himself about industries and markets with the intensity of someone who would eventually dominate them. Carnegie's transformation from poverty to becoming one of the richest men in history wasn't the result of luck or circumstances. It was the result of consistently acting from the identity of someone who understood wealth creation, even when his current reality contradicted that identity. He made decisions from the perspective of an industrialist before he owned any industry. He invested time in relationships with successful people because he saw himself as their peer, not their subordinate. He thought strategically about opportunities because he knew he was destined to create opportunities for others. The daily practices that support identity transformation are both simple and profound. Your morning visualization becomes more than positive thinking. You spend time mentally rehearsing your day from the perspective of the person you're becoming. You see yourself handling challenges with grace and wisdom. You experience yourself making decisions that align with your highest values. You feel the confidence and clarity of someone who knows their worth and purpose. Your evening reflection becomes a powerful tool for reinforcing your evolving identity. Instead of simply reviewing what happened, you ask identity-based questions. How did I show up today as the person I'm becoming? What decisions reflected my highest self? Where did I act from old patterns instead of new identity? This isn't self-criticism. It's identity calibration. You're fine-tuning your actions to match your aspirations. Your language patterns begin shifting to support your transformation. The person you're becoming doesn't say, "I'm trying to lose weight." They say, "I'm the type of person who maintains a healthy body." They don't say, "I'm attempting to build a business." They say, "I'm an entrepreneur." They don't say, "I hope to become successful." They say, "I'm successful, and I'm committed to expressing that success in increasingly meaningful ways." This isn't semantic manipulation. This is identity alignment. Your brain believes what you consistently tell it. When you describe yourself in terms of becoming rather than trying, you activate different neural networks. When you use identity language rather than aspiration language, you strengthen the mental pathways associated with achievement rather than effort. The physical dimension of this transformation is equally important. The person you're becoming carries themselves differently. Their posture reflects confidence and self-respect. Their pace reflects purposefulness rather than hurry or hesitation. Their presence commands attention not through force, but through the quiet power of someone who knows their worth. Your workspace becomes a reflection of your evolving identity. The successful person you're becoming organizes their environment to support productivity and inspiration. They invest in tools and resources that reflect their commitment to excellence. They create systems and structures that support their highest functioning. Your external environment begins mirroring your internal transformation. The way you handle money shifts dramatically when you think like the wealthy person you're becoming. You begin tracking your finances with the precision of someone building an empire. You make spending decisions based on alignment with your goals rather than immediate desires. You invest in your education and development because you understand that your skills and knowledge are your most valuable assets. You begin building multiple streams of income because you think like someone who creates wealth rather than just earning wages. I hope you're finding these insights valuable enough to consider subscribing, because we're building a community of people committed to genuine transformation, not just temporary motivation. The depth of change we're exploring requires ongoing support and accountability. Your relationship patterns evolve as your identity shifts. The person you're becoming doesn't tolerate relationships that drain their energy or compromise their values. They attract people who support their growth and challenge them to be their best. They give from abundance rather than need, and they receive without guilt because they understand their worth. They see every relationship as an opportunity for mutual elevation rather than transaction. The story of Benjamin Franklin illustrates this principle beautifully. Franklin didn't just accumulate knowledge. He became a learner. He didn't just develop skills. He became someone committed to mastery. He didn't just build a printing business. He became an entrepreneur who saw opportunities everywhere. His 13 virtues weren't just goals he hoped to achieve. They were identity characteristics he committed to embody. Franklin's approach to character development was systematic and identity-based. He didn't try to change everything at once. He focused on one virtue at a time, not as something he was trying to do, but as someone he was becoming. When working on temperance, he didn't just avoid overindulgence. He became someone who naturally practiced moderation. When developing frugality, he didn't just save money. He became someone who understood the relationship between resources and results. This methodical approach to identity transformation created compound effects that shaped not just Franklin's personal success, but his impact on history. His identity as a learner led him to scientific discoveries. His identity as a communicator led him to influence public opinion. His identity as a diplomat led him to help birth a nation. None of this was accident or luck. It was the natural result of someone who had systematically cultivated an identity aligned with greatness. The spiritual dimension of acting, as if you're living your dream life, connects you with what many traditions call your highest self or true nature. When you operate from this elevated identity, you're not pretending to be someone else. You're remembering who you actually are beneath the layers of conditioning, fear, and limitation that have accumulated over time. You're returning to the essential you that exists before doubt and after certainty. This spiritual alignment creates what psychologists call flow states more frequently and naturally. When your actions align with your highest identity, you experience less internal friction and more effortless achievement. Time seems to move differently. Challenges feel like puzzles rather than problems. Opportunities appear more frequently because your awareness is calibrated to recognize them. The practice of gratitude becomes more than positive thinking when approached from this identity-based perspective. The person you're becoming doesn't practice gratitude to feel better about their current circumstances. They practice gratitude because grateful people naturally attract more to be grateful for. They understand that appreciation is a frequency that aligns them with abundance in all its forms. Your morning gratitude practice becomes an identity rehearsal. You don't just list things you're thankful for. You embody the grateful nature of the person you're becoming. You feel appreciation in your body. not just think it in your mind. You express gratitude for current blessings and future possibilities with equal intensity because you understand that gratitude is a magnet for more of what you appreciate. The way you handle setbacks and failures transforms completely when you operate from your highest identity. The person you're becoming doesn't see failure as evidence of inadequacy. They see it as feedback, as course correction, as the very process through which they develop resilience and wisdom. Their relationship with difficulty shifts from resistance to curiosity. They ask, "What is this experience teaching me?" rather than, "Why is this happening to me?" Consider the story of Winston Churchill, a man who embodied this principle through some of history's darkest hours. Churchill's early political career was marked by spectacular failures and public humiliation, but he never allowed external circumstances to diminish his internal sense of destiny. He carried himself with the bearing of someone who would eventually be called upon for great service, even when that service seemed unlikely or impossible. During his wilderness years in the 1930s, when his political career seemed over and his warnings about Nazi Germany were ignored, Churchill continued to prepare himself as if he would eventually lead his nation through its greatest crisis. He studied military history with the intensity of someone who would command in war. He honed his oratory skills as if he would need to inspire a nation. He developed his strategic thinking as if the fate of democracy would depend on his decisions. When Churchill finally became Prime Minister during Britain's darkest hour, he was ready, not because he had been trained for that specific moment, but because he had been living from the identity of someone destined for historic leadership his entire adult life. His speeches didn't just rally a nation. They reflected the unshakable certainty of someone who knew that defeat was not an option because it wasn't compatible with who he was. Your daily habits become expressions of identity rather than disciplines you force yourself to maintain. The person you're becoming exercises regularly not because they have to, but because they value their health and energy. They eat nourishing foods not because they're on a diet, but because they respect their body as the vehicle for their dreams. They read educational material not because they should, but because they're committed to continuous growth. This shift from external discipline to internal identity creates sustainability that willpower alone cannot provide. When your habits flow from who you are rather than who you think you should be, they become as natural as breathing. You no longer have to fight yourself to do the right thing, because doing the right thing is aligned with your sense of self. Your financial habits undergo the same transformation. The wealthy person you're becoming doesn't save money because they have to. They save because they understand the power of accumulated resources. They don't invest because it's recommended. They invest because they think like owners rather than consumers. They don't track expenses because it's tedious. They track expenses because they understand that awareness is the foundation of control. The person you're becoming approaches money with the strategic thinking of someone building long-term wealth rather than solving short-term problems. They make spending decisions based on value rather than price. They invest in assets that appreciate rather than liabilities that depreciate. They build multiple streams of income because they think like entrepreneurs rather than employees, regardless of their current employment status. Your learning and development practices shift from random consumption to strategic skill building. The successful person you're becoming doesn't just read whatever catches their attention. They curate their learning based on the capabilities they need to develop. They don't just attend seminars and workshops. They implement what they learn with the systematic approach of someone building expertise. They don't just collect information. They develop competencies that increase their value in the marketplace. The story of Nikola Tesla demonstrates the power of identity-based learning and development. Tesla didn't just study electrical engineering. He became someone who thought in terms of electrical possibilities that others couldn't even imagine. His mind wasn't just educated, it was calibrated to see solutions that didn't yet exist. He didn't just conduct experiments. He lived in a reality where the impossible was simply the not yet achieved. Tesla's approach to innovation was identity-based. He saw himself as a conduit for bringing future technologies into present reality. He didn't doubt his visions because doubt was incompatible with his identity as someone who understood the fundamental principles of energy and matter. His confidence wasn't arrogance. It was the natural result of someone who had aligned their identity with discovery and innovation. The networking and relationship-building activities of the person you're becoming are strategic and authentic. They don't network to get something from people. They network to create mutual value and shared growth. They don't seek mentors because they feel inadequate. They seek mentors because they understand that wisdom is accelerated through relationships with people who have achieved what they're working to achieve. Your communication style evolves to reflect your expanding identity. The person you're becoming speaks with quiet confidence rather than loud insecurity. They listen with the attention of someone who values learning over being right. They ask questions that demonstrate genuine curiosity, rather than trying to impress others with their knowledge. They share ideas that add value to conversations, rather than dominating them. The person you're becoming understands that influence comes through service, rather than self-promotion. They look for ways to help others achieve their goals, knowing that success is not a limited resource. They celebrate the achievements of others because they operate from abundance rather than scarcity. They collaborate rather than compete, because they understand that the biggest opportunities come through partnership. Your time management reflects the priorities of someone who understands that time is their most valuable resource. The person you're becoming doesn't just fill their calendar with activities. They design their schedule to support their most important goals. They don't just respond to urgent demands. They invest time in important activities that create long-term results. They understand the difference between being busy and being productive. The person you're becoming treats their time as an investment portfolio. They allocate time to learning, to building relationships, to developing skills, to creating value, and to rest and renewal. They understand that how they spend their hours determines how they spend their years, and how they spend their years determines how they spend their life. Your response to criticism and feedback transforms when you operate from your highest identity. The person you're becoming doesn't take criticism personally because they understand that feedback is information, not identity judgment. They separate their sense of self-worth from external opinions while remaining open to legitimate insights that can help them grow. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent to feedback or developing thick skin that prevents learning. It means developing the discernment to distinguish between feedback that serves your growth and criticism that reflects the limitations of the person offering it. The person you're becoming receives valuable feedback with gratitude and ignores destructive criticism with indifference. The story of Leonardo da Vinci illustrates the power of identity-based learning and creation. Leonardo didn't just paint pictures. He became someone who saw the world as an infinite source of beauty and possibility. He didn't just study anatomy. He became someone who understood the connection between form and function in all living systems. He didn't just design machines. He became someone who could envision technologies centuries before they could be built. Leonardo's approach to life was integrated and identity-based. His art informed his science informed his engineering, and his engineering informed his art. He didn't compartmentalize his interests because his identity was that of someone who saw connections and possibilities everywhere. His curiosity wasn't a hobby, it was the defining characteristic of who he was. Your creative expression becomes more authentic and powerful when it flows from your true identity, rather than from trying to meet external expectations. The person you're becoming creates not to be liked or approved of, but to express the unique perspective and gifts that only they possess. They understand that their authentic expression is their greatest contribution to the world. This authentic creative expression extends beyond traditionally artistic pursuits. The way you solve problems becomes creative when you approach them from your highest identity. The way you build relationships becomes creative when you see each person as a unique individual, worthy of personalized attention. The way you approach your work becomes creative when you see it as an opportunity to express your values and capabilities. The physical health practices of the person you're becoming reflect their understanding that their body is the vehicle for their dreams. They don't exercise just to look good. They exercise to feel energetic and capable. They don't eat well just to lose weight. They eat well to fuel optimal performance. They don't get adequate sleep just because it's recommended. They prioritize rest because they understand that recovery is where growth happens. Your relationship with your body becomes one of partnership rather than opposition. The person you're becoming treats their body as an ally in achieving their goals rather than an obstacle to overcome. They listen to their body's signals and respond with appropriate action. They understand that physical vitality is the foundation of mental clarity and emotional stability. Before we go much deeper, I want to encourage you to subscribe to this channel if these ideas are resonating with you. We're building a community of people committed to practical transformation, and having you as part of this journey makes it more powerful for everyone involved. The way you handle stress and pressure shifts dramatically when you operate from your highest identity. The person you're becoming doesn't see stress as something happening to them. They see it as something they can learn to navigate and transform. They develop practices and perspectives that allow them to remain centered and effective even in challenging circumstances. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally numb or pretending that difficulties don't affect you. It means developing the inner resources and practical skills to respond to challenges from a place of strength rather than fear. The person you're becoming has tools and techniques for managing their state, maintaining their perspective, and taking effective action even when external circumstances are chaotic. Your spiritual practice becomes more grounded and practical when approached from an identity-based perspective. The person you're becoming doesn't engage in spiritual practices to escape reality. They engage in them to become more effective in reality. They meditate not to feel good, but to develop the mental clarity and emotional stability that support wise decision-making. They study wisdom traditions, not for philosophical entertainment, but for practical guidance on living with purpose and integrity. The person you're becoming understands that spiritual development and practical achievement are not opposing forces. They're complementary aspects of a life lived from your highest potential. Your spiritual practices make you more effective in the world, and your worldly activities become expressions of your spiritual values. Your approach to goal setting and achievement transforms when you understand the difference between having goals and becoming someone who naturally achieves goals. The person you're becoming doesn't just set targets. They develop the identity and capabilities that make those targets inevitable outcomes. They don't just work toward goals. They become the type of person for whom those goals are natural expressions. This shift eliminates the internal conflict between where you are and where you want to be. Instead of feeling frustrated by the gap between your current reality and your desired future, you focus on becoming the person who bridges that gap naturally. You're not trying to get something you don't have. You're expressing something you already are. Consider the story of Julius Caesar, a man who understood the power of identity in shaping destiny. Caesar didn't just seek political power. He became someone whose natural presence commanded authority and respect. He didn't just study military tactics. He became someone who could inspire loyalty and courage in others. He didn't just pursue ambition. He became someone whose vision was large enough to encompass the transformation of civilization itself. Caesar's famous statement upon crossing the Rubicon, "The die is cast," reflects his understanding that identity creates destiny. He wasn't gambling on an uncertain outcome. He was acting from the certainty of someone who knew who he was and what he was capable of achieving. His confidence wasn't based on external circumstances. It was based on internal alignment with his highest potential. Your daily routines become rituals of transformation when approached from this identity-based perspective. Your morning routine isn't just a series of tasks to complete. It's a daily practice of stepping into the person you're becoming. Your evening routine isn't just preparation for sleep. It's a time of reflection and recommitment to your evolving identity. These routines create structure and rhythm that support your transformation. They provide consistent touchpoints throughout the day where you align with your highest self. They become anchors of stability in a changing world and foundations for building the life you envision. The person you're becoming approaches challenges with what psychologists call a growth mindset. They don't see difficulties as threats to their identity. They see them as opportunities to develop capabilities they didn't know they possessed. They don't ask, "Why is this happening to me?" They ask, "How is this helping me become who I need to be?" This shift in perspective transforms obstacles from roadblocks into stepping stones. The person you're becoming doesn't try to avoid challenges. They develop the resilience and resourcefulness to navigate them successfully. They understand that strength is built through resistance. Wisdom is gained through experience. and character is forged through difficulty. Your relationship with money continues evolving as your identity expands. The wealthy person you're becoming doesn't see money as the goal. They see it as a tool for creating value and impact. They don't pursue wealth for security. They build wealth for the freedom and opportunities it provides. They don't hoard money out of fear. They circulate it strategically to create more value for themselves and others. The person you're becoming understands that wealth is created through value creation. They focus on developing skills, building relationships, and creating solutions that serve others while generating income for themselves. They think like investors rather than consumers, like owners rather than renters, like creators rather than spectators. Your learning never stops when you embrace the identity of someone committed to continuous growth. The person you're becoming doesn't see education as something that ends with formal schooling. They see it as a lifelong commitment to expanding their capabilities and understanding. They read books, attend seminars, seek mentors, and engage in experiences that challenge them to grow. This commitment to learning isn't driven by insecurity or inadequacy. It's driven by curiosity and the understanding that growth is the natural expression of a life lived fully. The person you're becoming learns not because they're behind, but because they're committed to staying ahead. The story of Theodore Roosevelt demonstrates the power of identity-based growth and development. Roosevelt didn't just hold political offices. He became someone who embodied the vigorous, principled leadership that his era demanded. He didn't just pursue diverse interests. He became someone whose curiosity and energy were legendary. He didn't just face challenges. He became someone who thrived in the face of adversity. Roosevelt's approach to life was characterized by what he called the strenuous life. He didn't seek comfort or ease. He sought growth and contribution. His identity was that of someone who pushed boundaries, challenged limitations, and refused to settle for mediocrity. This identity shaped every aspect of his life, from his political career, to his writing, to his exploration, to his approach to physical fitness. Your service to others becomes more powerful when it flows from your authentic identity rather than from obligation or guilt. The person you're becoming serves not because they should, but because service is a natural expression of their abundance and capability. They give not to get something in return, but because giving is aligned with their values and identity. This authentic service creates more impact than forced charity or obligatory volunteering. When you serve from your true identity, you bring your best gifts and highest energy to the task. You serve with joy rather than resentment, with creativity rather than routine, with love rather than duty. Your legacy becomes important not as something you hope others will remember, but as the natural result of living from your highest identity. The person you're becoming doesn't try to create a legacy. They live in such alignment with their values and purpose that legacy is the inevitable outcome. They focus on being rather than seeming, on contributing rather than impressing, on growing rather than appearing. This focus on authentic being rather than image management creates the kind of lasting impact that truly matters. The person you're becoming influences others not through manipulation or persuasion, but through the power of their example. They inspire not through speeches, but through their way of living. The compound effect of all these identity-aligned actions creates momentum that becomes increasingly powerful over time. Small, consistent choices made from your highest identity accumulate into significant results that seem miraculous to outside observers but feel natural to you. You're not forcing outcomes. You're allowing the natural consequences of aligned action to unfold. This momentum creates what psychologists call positive feedback loops. Success in one area reinforces your identity, which leads to better choices, which creates more success, which further reinforces your identity. The person you're becoming doesn't struggle to maintain positive habits because those habits flow naturally from who they are. They don't fight against negative tendencies because their identity no longer supports those patterns. Your decision-making process becomes increasingly efficient when you operate from a clear identity. The person you're becoming doesn't agonize over choices because they have clear criteria based on their values and goals. They ask simple questions. Does this align with who I'm becoming? Does this move me toward my vision? Does this express my highest values? The answers guide them toward decisions that compound their growth. This decision-making clarity eliminates the paralysis that stops most people from taking action. When you know who you are and where you're going, most choices become obvious. You don't waste mental energy on decisions that don't matter, and you make important decisions quickly based on your established criteria. The story of Alexander the Great illustrates the power of identity in creating extraordinary achievement. Alexander didn't just want to conquer territory. He became someone whose identity was inseparable from expanding the boundaries of the known world. He didn't just study military strategy. He became someone who could envision and execute campaigns that others considered impossible. He didn't just lead armies. He became someone who could inspire men to follow him to the ends of the earth. Alexander's tutor Aristotle noted that the young prince approached learning with the intensity of someone preparing for world-changing responsibility. Alexander didn't study philosophy as an academic exercise. He integrated wisdom principles that would guide his leadership of diverse peoples across vast territories. He didn't just train physically. He developed the legendary endurance and courage that would carry him through years of continuous campaign. By the time Alexander began his conquest of the known world, he wasn't trying to become great. He was expressing the greatness that had become his identity through years of preparation. His confidence wasn't arrogance. It was the natural result of someone who had thoroughly prepared for the role history would ask him to play. Your relationship with time undergoes a fundamental shift when you operate from your highest identity. The person you're becoming doesn't just manage time. They invest time in activities that compound their growth and results. They understand the difference between urgent and important, and they consistently choose important activities even when urgent demands clamor for attention. This relationship with time creates what researchers call temporal perspective. You make decisions based on long-term consequences rather than short-term comfort. You sacrifice immediate gratification for meaningful achievement. You invest present effort for future freedom. This temporal awareness allows you to create results that others consider impossible, because most people optimize for today, while you optimize for the long term. Your energy management becomes as important as your time management when you understand that energy, not time, is your most valuable resource. The person you're becoming doesn't just work hard. They work at their peak energy levels on their most important priorities. They understand their natural rhythms and schedule demanding tasks when their energy is highest. This energy awareness extends to emotional and mental energy as well as physical energy. The person you're becoming protects their emotional energy by choosing their responses to events rather than reacting automatically. They preserve their mental energy by focusing on what they can control rather than worrying about what they cannot. The practical application of this energy management creates compound advantages over time. When you consistently operate at high energy levels, you produce better work, make better decisions, and create better relationships. This improved performance reinforces your identity as someone capable of excellence, which motivates even higher performance. Your financial intelligence continues developing as you embrace the identity of someone who builds wealth. The person you're becoming doesn't just earn money. They create systems that generate income while they sleep. They don't just save money. They invest money in assets that appreciate and produce cash flow. They don't just spend money. They deploy capital strategically to create more opportunities. This financial sophistication develops through consistent study and application of wealth-building principles. You read books about investing, entrepreneurship, and financial strategy, with the attention of someone whose financial freedom depends on understanding these concepts. You seek mentors and advisors who can guide your financial education. You practice what you learn with the patience of someone building long-term wealth rather than seeking quick gains. The person you're becoming understands that money is attracted to value creation. They focus on developing skills, building systems, and creating solutions that serve others while generating profit. They think about money as energy that flows to where it can create the most value. And they position themselves to capture that flow through valuable contributions. Your relationship with failure transforms completely when you operate from your highest identity. The person you're becoming doesn't fear failure because they understand that failure is simply feedback about what doesn't work. They don't take failure personally because they separate their actions from their identity. They learn from failure quickly and apply those lessons to improve their approach. This healthy relationship with failure allows you to take risks that others avoid. The person you're becoming attempts things that might not work because they know that the lessons from intelligent failure are more valuable than the safety of never trying. They understand that the biggest risk is not taking any risks in a world that rewards innovation and courage. Your capacity for handling uncertainty increases when you develop the identity of someone who thrives in ambiguous situations. The person you're becoming doesn't need to have all the answers before taking action. They're comfortable with uncertainty because they trust their ability to adapt and learn as circumstances change. They see uncertainty not as a threat, but as the space where opportunities exist. This comfort with uncertainty allows you to move forward even when the path isn't completely clear. You don't wait for perfect conditions because you understand that conditions are never perfect. You take action based on the best information available and adjust course as you learn more. The story of Genghis Khan demonstrates the power of identity in overcoming impossible odds. Born into poverty and tribal warfare, Khan could have accepted the limitations of his circumstances. Instead, he developed the identity of someone destined to unite the fractured tribes of the steppes under a single banner. He didn't just want to be a successful warrior. He became someone whose vision encompassed the creation of the largest contiguous empire in history. Khan's approach to leadership was identity-based. He didn't rule through fear alone. He became someone who could inspire loyalty across cultural and ethnic boundaries. He didn't just conquer territory. He became someone who could integrate diverse peoples into a unified force. His success wasn't just military, it was organizational, creating systems that survived long after his death. Your communication skills develop naturally when you embrace the identity of someone who adds value through their words. The person you're becoming doesn't just talk to fill silence. They speak to inform, inspire, or serve others. They don't argue to be right. They discuss to understand and find solutions. They don't gossip to entertain. They share information that helps others grow. This elevated approach to communication attracts opportunities and relationships that align with your highest goals. People begin seeking your perspective because they associate you with wisdom and valuable insights. Your words carry more weight because they're backed by the integrity of someone who speaks with purpose. Your listening skills become equally powerful as your speaking skills. The person you're becoming listens not just to respond, but to understand. They ask questions that help others clarify their thoughts and feelings. They create space for others to express themselves fully. This quality of listening builds trust and deepens relationships in ways that talking cannot. Your physical presence becomes more powerful when it reflects your inner transformation. The person you're becoming carries themselves with quiet confidence rather than loud bravado. Their posture reflects self-respect and alertness. Their movements are purposeful rather than restless or hesitant. Their energy is calm but dynamic, peaceful but powerful. This presence isn't something you put on like a costume. It's the natural expression of someone who has aligned their inner and outer worlds. When your actions match your values, when your behavior reflects your identity, when your daily choices support your long-term vision, you naturally develop the kind of presence that others notice and respect. The systematic approach to developing this presence involves consistent attention to how you show up in the world. You practice good posture, not just for health, but because confident people carry themselves with dignity. You dress appropriately for your goals, not to impress others, but because your appearance should reflect your self-respect and professional aspirations. Your learning becomes more strategic when you focus on capabilities that serve your evolving identity. The person you're becoming doesn't just consume information randomly. They develop competencies systematically. They identify the knowledge and skills required for their next level of success and focus their learning energy on acquiring those specific capabilities. This strategic learning creates compound advantages because each new skill or piece of knowledge builds on previous learning. You're not just accumulating information, You're developing integrated capabilities that allow you to handle increasingly complex challenges and opportunities. The person you're becoming also learns from experience more effectively than others because they approach experiences with the intention to extract lessons. They don't just live through events, they analyze them for insights that can improve future performance. They keep journals to capture these insights and review them regularly to reinforce their learning. Your creativity expands when you embrace the identity of someone who generates novel solutions to meaningful problems. The person you're becoming doesn't wait for inspiration. They create conditions that foster creative thinking. They expose themselves to diverse experiences and perspectives because creativity often emerges from connecting seemingly unrelated ideas. This creative capability becomes increasingly valuable in a world that rewards innovation and adaptation. The person you're becoming doesn't just follow established procedures. They improve systems and processes through creative thinking. They don't just solve existing problems. They identify opportunities that others miss and create solutions that serve unmet needs. Your capacity for building and leading teams grows as you develop the identity of someone who empowers others to achieve their best. The person you're becoming doesn't just manage people, they inspire people to contribute their highest capabilities toward shared goals. They create environments where others can grow and succeed because they understand that their success is multiplied through the success of others. This leadership capability doesn't require a formal position or title. The person you're becoming leads through their example, their vision, and their commitment to serving something larger than themselves. They influence through inspiration rather than intimidation, through collaboration rather than competition. The story of Marcus Aurelius provides another powerful example of identity-based leadership. Aurelius didn't just inherit the Roman throne. He prepared his entire life to embody the philosophical principles of Stoicism in practical governance. He didn't just rule an empire. He became someone who could maintain wisdom and justice even under the enormous pressures of absolute power. Aurelius approached leadership as a form of service rather than privilege. His identity was that of someone entrusted with the welfare of millions of people, and he took that responsibility with profound seriousness. His meditations reveal a leader who was constantly working to align his actions with his highest principles, even when those principles required personal sacrifice. Your contribution to others becomes more significant when it flows from your authentic strengths and capabilities. The person you're becoming doesn't try to help everyone with everything. They focus their service on areas where they can create the most value. They understand their unique gifts and talents and look for ways to apply those gifts in service of others. This focused contribution creates more impact than scattered efforts to please everyone. When you serve from your strengths, you provide better value to those you serve and experience more satisfaction from your service. You become known for specific capabilities rather than general helpfulness. Your resilience develops through consistent practice of responding to challenges from your highest identity rather than your reactive patterns. The person you're becoming doesn't avoid difficulties. They develop the mental and emotional resources to navigate difficulties successfully. They understand that resilience isn't about being strong enough to avoid breaking. It's about being flexible enough to bend without losing your essential shape. This resilience becomes a competitive advantage in a world full of uncertainty and change. While others are paralyzed by setbacks or overwhelmed by pressure, the person you're becoming adapts quickly and maintains forward momentum. They see challenges as opportunities to demonstrate their growth and capabilities. The practical development of resilience involves building physical, mental, and emotional reserves through consistent practices. You exercise regularly, not just for health, but for the mental resilience that comes from physical strength. You practice meditation or similar techniques, not just for peace, but for the emotional stability that allows you to respond, rather than react, to difficult situations. Your vision for your life becomes clearer and more compelling as you develop the identity of someone capable of achieving meaningful goals. The person you're becoming doesn't just hope for a better future. They design a future that reflects their highest possibilities and work systematically to create that future. This vision isn't just wishful thinking or positive visualization. It's a detailed, specific picture of what your life will look like when you fully express your potential. It includes not just what you'll have, but who you'll be, how you'll contribute, and what kind of impact you'll create in the world. The power of this vision lies not in its perfection, but in its ability to guide your daily decisions. When you have a clear picture of where you're going, you can evaluate opportunities and choices based on whether they move you toward or away from that vision. Your vision becomes a filter for decisions and a source of motivation during difficult periods. Your daily practices become more powerful when they're connected to this larger vision. You don't exercise just to be healthy. You exercise because physical vitality is required for the life you're creating. You don't read just to be informed. You read because knowledge is necessary for the contribution you're planning to make. The person you're becoming understands that success is not a destination, but a way of traveling. They don't wait to arrive at some future point to begin living successfully. They live successfully right now by aligning their current actions with their highest identity. They understand that who you are today determines what you'll have tomorrow, and they focus on becoming rather than getting. This understanding transforms the entire journey of achievement. Instead of postponing satisfaction until you reach your goals, you find satisfaction in the process of growing toward your goals. Instead of judging your worth by your current circumstances, you derive confidence from the direction of your movement. Your relationships deepen when you interact with others from your highest identity, rather than your defensive patterns. The person you're becoming doesn't need others to validate their worth. They interact from a place of abundance rather than need. They give their best to relationships because that's who they are, not because they expect something in return. This approach to relationships creates positive cycles that benefit everyone involved. When you show up as your best self consistently, you inspire others to show up as their best selves. When you approach relationships with generosity rather than transaction, you attract people who value genuine connection over mutual exploitation. The person you're becoming also maintains healthy boundaries in relationships because they respect themselves and others enough to be honest about their limits and needs. They don't sacrifice their values to maintain relationships that require them to compromise their integrity. They attract relationships that support their growth, rather than relationships that demand they remain small. As we near the end of our time together, I want to encourage you once more to subscribe to this channel if you're committed to this kind of deep, practical transformation. The community we're building here is focused on implementation, not just inspiration, and your participation makes it stronger for everyone involved. Your legacy begins now, not at the end of your life. The person you're becoming understands that every day is an opportunity to live in alignment with their highest values and contribute something meaningful to the world. They don't wait for retirement or some future point to begin making a difference. They make a difference through their daily choices and actions. This understanding gives profound meaning to ordinary activities. When you operate from your highest identity, everything you do becomes an expression of your values and a contribution to your vision. Your work becomes service. Your relationships become opportunities for mutual growth. Your challenges become opportunities for character development. The transformation we've been exploring isn't a temporary change or a surface-level adjustment. It's a fundamental reorientation of your entire being around your highest potential. When you truly embrace the identity of the person you're capable of becoming, everything changes. Your thoughts align with possibility rather than limitation. Your emotions reflect confidence rather than fear. Your actions create results rather than mere activity. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, but it can begin today. Right now, you can start making choices from the perspective of the person you're becoming. You can start speaking to yourself with the respect you deserve. You can start treating your time as the precious resource it is. You can start approaching challenges with curiosity rather than dread. The person you're becoming is not some distant, impossible ideal. They're the natural expression of capabilities you already possess, but haven't fully developed. They're who you are when fear and doubt no longer limit your expression. They're the you that emerges when you consistently choose growth over comfort, contribution over consumption, and purpose over pleasure. The journey of becoming this person is the most rewarding adventure you'll ever undertake. It's challenging because it requires you to consistently choose your highest response rather than your easiest response. It's demanding because it asks you to remain committed to your vision even when circumstances don't immediately reflect that vision. But it's also the most liberating path you can walk, because it frees you from the prison of limiting beliefs and small thinking. Every great person who has ever lived has walked this path of becoming. They weren't born extraordinary. They became extraordinary through the consistent practice of thinking, speaking, and acting from their highest identity. They faced the same fears, doubts, and challenges that you face. The difference was not in their circumstances, but in their response to those circumstances. You have within you right now everything necessary to begin this transformation. You have the ability to choose your thoughts. You have the power to direct your attention. You have the capability to decide your actions. These may seem like small powers, but they're the building blocks of destiny. Used consistently and strategically, they can transform not just your life, but your entire legacy. The world needs the person you're capable of becoming. Your unique combination of talents, experiences, and perspective creates possibilities that no one else can create. Your highest contribution is not some generic version of success, but the specific value that only you can provide when you fully express your potential. This is your invitation to stop living as if you're waiting for permission to be great. This is your call to begin acting as if you're already the person you're destined to become. This is your opportunity to transform not just what you have, but who you are. The person you're becoming is calling to you right now. They're inviting you to step into their reality, to think their thoughts, to make their decisions, to live their life. The only question is whether you're ready to answer that call. Your dream life is not somewhere in the future waiting for you to arrive. It's here in the present, waiting for you to inhabit it. The person you're capable of becoming is not some distant possibility. They're available to you right now through your next choice, your next action, your next decision to live from your highest identity rather than your historical patterns. This is how transformation works, not through dramatic overnight changes, but through the quiet, consistent choice to be who you're meant to be. One moment at a time, one decision at a time, one action at a time. Act as if you're already living your dream life, and watch as that dream becomes your reality. The forge of transformation is always burning. The question is whether you're willing to step into the fire and allow it to shape you into the person you're meant to become. Your future self is waiting. Your destiny is calling. Champions, your mind has been forged a little stronger today, but the real test isn't what you learned, it's what you do with it. Take action, dominate your day, and remember, we're not just building better thoughts, we're forging unstoppable lives. The forge doesn't stop, and neither do you. If this episode hit you where it counts, subscribe to Mental Forge Academy and join the Brotherhood of Champions who refuse to settle for ordinary. Go transform, strike while the mind is hot.